In this video, we break down 9 brutally honest modern Stoic lessons on how to stop taking offense, overcome hypersensitivity, and develop emotional resilience. These lessons cut through ego, insecurity, manipulation, and the trap of outrage culture, straight from a Stoic psychological mindset. 1. The root of offense is fragile ego. People today don't get offended because of what was said. They get offended because of what they believe it says about them. The trigger isn't the insult, it's the identity fear behind it. A Stoic sees offense not as a wound inflicted by others, but as a crack that already existed in the self. If you snap when someone questions you, mock you, or challenges your views, your reaction is simply evidence that you never believed in yourself to begin with. The modern world raised people to be emotionally padded, shielded, bubble-wrapped, protected from discomfort, and spoiled by validation. Children were rewarded for participation, not accomplishment. And now grown adults melt under opposing opinions. The Stoic says, "Show me a person easily offended, and I'll show you someone who has done very little work on themselves." Offense-taking is not a moral response. It's a thermometer of internal stability. When your ego is fragile, anything feels threatening. When your identity is unexamined, critique feels existential. When your confidence depends on others, disagreements feel like attacks. Here's the truth most people are terrified to accept. If words can break you, you are already broken. And that's not an insult. That's a starting point. The Stoic doesn't run from this realization. He embraces it. He doesn't seek environments that protect his sensitivity. He seeks inner strength that protects him everywhere. People think Stoicism makes you emotionless. No, Stoicism makes you emotionally sovereign, meaning your reactions belong to you, not to whoever manipulates your feelings. Hypersensitivity today has become a weapon. People pretend to be offended not because they truly are hurt, but because it gives them leverage, control, sympathy, attention, and power. Society rewards victimhood more than responsibility, outrage more than reason, blame more than accountability. The Stoic doesn't play this game. He doesn't crave validation. He doesn't weaponize feelings. He doesn't try to silence opposition. He simply says, if something is true, I accept it. If it is false, it does not apply to me. That attitude is invincible. Hypersensitivity is a self-centered worldview. Everything becomes about me. Every comment becomes a personal attack. Every disagreement is taken personally. Stoicism teaches, nothing is about you unless you make it about you. A Stoic sees insults like a mirror. If the insult matches reality, use it to improve. If the insult is false, it has nothing to grab onto. A man with no insecurity cannot be insulted. Modern culture sees offense as moral superiority. Stoicism sees offense as emotional immaturity. Offense-taking turns you into a puppet because anyone can make you react. Stoicism turns you sovereign because nobody owns your reactions but you. A Stoic has one question before responding. Is this about truth or ego? Most people respond emotionally because they don't know how to respond rationally. Their mind is undisciplined, their self-awareness untrained. Stoicism disciplines thought so emotion doesn't sabotage action. Hypersensitivity is insecurity seeking sympathy. Stoicism is insecurity dissolved through self-examination. Taking offense doesn't make you noble. It makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to manipulate. Emotional sovereignty makes you unpredictable, calm, patient, rational, and therefore dangerously independent. This is the first lesson. If offense controls you, you are ruled by ego. And until you confront that ego, you will continue reacting, hurting, lashing out, and exhausting your emotional energy on things that do not matter. The Stoic chooses inner strength, not emotional fragility, because a calm mind is unbreakable. 2. Hypersensitivity is emotional addiction. Most people think hypersensitivity is a personality trait. That's just how I am, they say, but a Stoic sees deeper. Hypersensitivity isn't a permanent feature of the self. It's an emotional habit, reinforced by repetition, reward, and attention. It's not who you are. It's what you've become accustomed to. And like every habit, hypersensitivity is sustained because it benefits the ego, not the soul, not the truth, not growth. The ego. Hypersensitivity gives people attention, sympathy, validation, power over others, drama, and emotional stimulation. Most won't admit it, but psychological addiction can form not just to substances, but to feelings. Some people are addicted to anger, others to self-pity, others to outrage. And some are addicted to being offended because it feeds the ego a distorted sense of importance. Look what someone said about me. I'm hurt, so everyone must care. You don't understand how this affected me. This triggered me, so please treat me delicately. All disguised as vulnerability, all rewarded in modern culture, all emotional dependency. Stoicism calls this weakness not because Stoics lack compassion, but because Stoicism is uncompromising in honesty. Before hypersensitivity is an external issue, it is a psychological craving. The person isn't actually wounded. They are emotionally stimulated. They don't want peace. They want to feel something. They don't want truth. They want attention. A Stoic sees outrage not as moral righteousness, but as ego indulgence. No Stoic needs to be offended because a Stoic is emotionally full, not emotionally hungry. He doesn't feed on drama like sustenance. He feeds on clarity, logic, and virtue. Hypersensitivity thrives where the soul is starved. This is why modern hypersensitive culture explodes online. Social media offers an endless buffet of reactions: outrage, opinion wars, offense, emotional games, ego validation. A hypersensitive mind scrolls not for learning, but for a reason to feel offended, because offense gives identity. I am upset, therefore I exist. That is the subconscious logic. That is why Stoicism teaches emotional independence, so that your worth isn't measured by how much attention your outrage receives. Let's go deeper. Hypersensitivity does not protect you. It weakens you. The hypersensitive person thinks they are guarding their feelings. But in reality, every offense drains emotional energy, reduces rational clarity, makes you easier to manipulate, lowers psychological resilience, increases dependence on approval. People think sensitivity gives them strength, but sensitivity without emotional discipline is vulnerability advertised publicly. A Stoic doesn't brag about emotional wounds. He works on them silently. People who are constantly offended think they are noble. But every time they overreact, they hand control of their emotional state to strangers. That is not empowerment. That is emotional enslavement. Stoicism seeks freedom. Hypersensitivity seeks pity. Hypersensitivity needs external regulation. Stoicism self-regulates. A hypersensitive mind constantly requires the environment to change. Don't talk like that. Don't express that opinion. Don't disagree with me. I need safety. But a Stoic changes internally. He says, if something disturbs me, I will examine myself first, not demand external silence. That is power. Hypersensitive people want others to tiptoe around them. Stoics want full reality, raw, unfiltered, because truth sharpens them. Hypersensitivity pretends everything is personal. Most things in life have nothing to do with you. Someone's frustration is about their life. Someone's opinion comes from their worldview. Someone's insult comes from insecurity. Someone's anger comes from their wounds. But hypersensitivity personalizes everything. Stoicism depersonalizes it. A Stoic asks, is this actually about me? Or is this just noise that touches nothing internal? When the ego is starving, everything becomes a meal. When the ego is disciplined, nothing becomes fuel. Hypersensitivity and manipulation. A hypersensitive person unintentionally manipulates others by forcing them to walk on emotional eggshells. But some use hypersensitivity deliberately as a weapon, to guilt trip, to silence disagreement, to take moral high ground, to gain advantage, to control conversations. Stoicism dismantles this manipulation by refusing to participate. The Stoic is calm. He cannot be blackmailed emotionally because he does not react emotionally. Hypersensitivity and victim identity. This is painful to hear, but necessary. Many hypersensitive people like being victims. Why? Victims are not expected to be strong. Victims don't have to take accountability. Victims receive attention and sympathy. Victims are special. Victims avoid criticism. Stoicism destroys victim identity by returning responsibility to the individual. If something offends me, the Stoic asks, what weakness in me allowed this to disturb my peace? That question kills emotional addiction in its roots. Hypersensitivity and truth. The hypersensitive person is not interested in truth, only protection. The Stoic is not interested in comfort, only truth. Truth sometimes hurts, but the Stoic sees that hurt as cleansing, not damaging. Hypersensitivity sees truth as an attack, not a mirror. Hypersensitivity is not emotional intelligence. Modern society falsely teaches people that being emotionally sensitive means you are emotionally intelligent. That is a lie. Emotional intelligence means seeing through reactions, understanding internal triggers, refusing emotional slavery, regulating responses, not demanding protection. That is Stoicism. The Stoic path out of hypersensitivity. A Stoic doesn't shame hypersensitivity. He transforms it. He takes every reaction as a lesson. If this bothers me, what does it reveal about me? He recognizes, I can't control people. I can't control speech. I can't control opinions. I can't control external chaos. But I can control how I interpret, how I respond, how I carry myself, how I think. That is total internal sovereignty. The Stoic strategy. A Stoic replaces fragile identity with tested character, emotional dependency with self-sufficiency, reactive ego with discerning awareness, victimhood with responsibility, attention-seeking with truth-seeking. Final truth of this lesson: hypersensitivity is not nature, it is habit. And what is habit can be unlearned. What is reinforced can be rewired. What is emotional addiction can be replaced with internal discipline. The Stoic path does not numb you, it frees you. It gives peace that is independent of validation, independent of opinions, independent of offense. And that peace is terrifying to those who depend on drama to feel alive. 3. Offense as emotional projection. One of the deepest truths of Stoicism, and one that modern psychology echoes, is this: you are rarely offended by what is said. You are offended by what you secretly believe about yourself. People don't take offense because of reality. They take offense because of projection. A remark, a disagreement, a tone, a word, these are not wounds. They are mirrors revealing what was already broken inside. You cannot be shattered by what you do not identify with. You cannot be insulted by what you do not silently fear is true. If someone calls you lazy, and you know in your bones you are disciplined, their comment is background noise. But if deep inside you know you have been slacking, avoiding responsibility, procrastinating, then that single word grabs you by the throat. That is projection. The hypersensitive person doesn't react to insults. They react to internal insecurities that the insult touches. Offense is autobiography. What triggers you exposes you. This is why Stoicism seems brutal to outsiders, because it forces you to look inward before responding outward. It demands accountability for your reactions, instead of blaming someone else for provoking them. In modern culture, projection is disguised. They hurt my feelings really means they revealed something I haven't worked on. They offended me really means They touched a part of me I'm insecure about. That makes me uncomfortable really means that challenges beliefs I haven't examined. The hypersensitive person externalizes responsibility. The Stoic internalizes it. When someone reacts emotionally, they think they are responding to the world, but they are responding to themselves. Most people never realize this. They think the emotion arose from outside when it came from inside. Modern minds are trained to avoid introspection. They escape into blame, outrage, self-righteousness, moral superiority, anything except self-examination. They never pause long enough to ask the most transformative question a Stoic asks. What does this reaction reveal about me? That single question destroys hypersensitivity. This is why Stoicism is terrifying to fragile egos. It doesn't to soothe you, it reveals you. And revelation is painful. The truth is painful, but pain is purification. The psychology behind projection. Projection is the unconscious attempt to avoid confronting internal truths by pretending they are external threats. If I feel shame, I attack the critic. If I feel insecure, I attack the messenger. If I feel unworthy, I blame the world for reminding me. Projection is a shield, but it is a shield made of paper. It protects nothing. The Stoic does not waste energy on defense. He uses that energy on self-examination. Instead of saying, "How dare they say that?" he asks, "Why did that bother me?" This shift is liberation. The fragile ego needs enemies. Projection makes the mind invent enemies where there are none. A simple disagreement becomes an attack. A critique becomes an insult. A correction becomes hate. Why? Because the ego cannot survive reality. It needs emotional battles to feel important. Stoicism kills the fantasy of imagined enemies. It forces you to face yourself. The hypersensitive person says, "They hurt me." The Stoic says, "I revealed myself, not to others, to myself." Why projection makes you manipulable. Projection turns emotional reactivity into a puppet string. Anyone who wants to manipulate you only needs to aim their words at your insecurities. They don't even have to be accurate. They just have to guess. If you are insecure about intelligence, they call you stupid. If you are insecure about appearance, they mock your looks. If you are insecure about competence, they question your ability. If you are insecure about approval, they withdraw attention. And just like that, you react. They own your emotions. The Stoic cannot be manipulated, not because he is emotionless, but because he understands his emotions. His triggers do not drive him. He disarms them through self-awareness. Projection is emotional immaturity. It is psychological infancy, the mind that has never learned to face itself. Children blame everything outside them. Adults take accountability. Stoicism forces maturity. It demands responsibility. It requires honesty that most people cannot stomach. That is why hypersensitivity is so common and Stoicism so rare. Projection wants comfort. Stoicism wants truth. Projection protects illusions. Stoicism destroys illusions. This is why the hypersensitive person often hates the Stoic, not because the Stoic harms them, but because the Stoic reveals truths they are terrified to face. Truth will always offend the person who built their identity on illusion. The Stoic alternative to projection. The Stoic replaces projection with introspection. Instead of, "You offended me," he asks, "Why am I reactive?" Instead of, "You shouldn't say that," he asks, "Why does that matter to me?" Instead of, "You're hurting my self-esteem," he asks, "Why is my self-esteem not internal?" This transformation kills hypersensitivity at its root. Projection is fear of self. The hypersensitive person doesn't fear insults. They fear self-awareness. They fear discovering that their identity is fragile, their confidence is artificial, their worldview is untested. They fear facing who they truly are. Stoicism says the only person worth knowing is yourself, stripped of delusion, stripped of projection, stripped of ego. projection dissolved by courage. It takes courage to look inward. Weak minds hide from themselves. Strong minds confront themselves. A Stoic is willing to say, I still have weaknesses. I still have insecurities. I still have blind spots. And that is exactly where my work begins. The hypersensitive person tries to hide their wounds. The Stoic exposes them to light, because wounds cannot heal in darkness. Final truth of this lesson: when you are offended, you are not reacting to someone else. You are reacting to a part of yourself you haven't explored yet. That is projection. Recognize it, and hypersensitivity loses its power. And once you stop projecting, you stop being controlled. You stop being fragile. You stop being offended by meaningless noise. You become sovereign, emotionally independent. And emotional independence is true Stoic freedom. 4. Offense thrives where weak identity exists. A Stoic truth that terrifies most people is this: you do not get offended because someone attacked you. You get offended because you do not know who you are. Hypersensitivity isn't born from what was said. It is born from weak identity, from a self built on external approval rather than internal certainty. When your sense of identity is fragile, any opposing idea feels like a personal threat. Not because the idea is true, but because your identity is paper thin. You react not because someone hurt you. You react because someone exposed your insecurity. Weak identity is like glass, easily shattered, loudly broken, traumatically fragile. Strong identity is like iron, silent, steady, unbreakable, unshaken. A Stoic identity is forged internally, not borrowed externally. It is rooted in self-awareness, not in validation. It is based on character, not opinion. That is why the Stoic rarely feels offended. There is no weak foundation to protect. Weak identity needs others to validate it. Strong identity validates itself. Weak identity cannot tolerate disagreement. Strong identity welcomes challenge. Weak identity takes everything personally. Strong identity understands nothing personal exists unless you make it personal. Let's go deeper. Weak identity is built on external recognition. Most people do not know who they are, except through the reflection of others. Their identity depends on applause, approval, attention, popularity, reassurance. Their self-worth is outsourced, borrowed from other minds. They never formed their own identity. They stitched one together from expectations. So when someone criticizes them, disagrees with them, questions them, or challenges them, they collapse. Why? Because their identity was never real. It was assembled, not developed. It is a mask, not a self. A constructed persona cannot withstand pressure. A real identity can. This is why a single comment on social media destroys someone's day. Why a disagreement ruins their mood. Why a critique feels like violence. Why they spend hours defending their views online like Holy Scripture. Not because they care about truth, but because they have nothing inside themselves to stand on. Weak identity is loud because it is empty. Weak identity feeds on labels. People cling to labels. I am this kind of person. I belong to this group. I identify with this belief. I stand for this ideology. I represent this community. But the deeper the emotional attachment to labels, the weaker the self. A Stoic does not cling to labels. He clings to reality. Labels are social armor. Identity is truth. When identity depends on labels, disagreement becomes offensive because it threatens the armor. But when identity is rooted in internal character, labels are irrelevant. You cannot offend someone who knows themselves. Weak identity needs emotional padding. Weak identity constantly seeks emotional safety. Be nice to me. Protect my feelings. Don't disagree with me. Don't confront me. Don't challenge me. But emotional padding only makes the identity weaker. Strength is born from discomfort, not protection. A Stoic does not ask others to soften truth. He strengthens himself to bear truth. Weak identity avoids discomfort. Strong identity grows from it. Weak identity cannot handle contradiction. Weak identity reacts with rage, offense, outrage, victimhood, because contradiction to the ego feels like death. But strong identity has no ego to defend. It knows who it is, regardless of external noise. So disagreement, insult, challenge, they are irrelevant. The Stoic remains unmoved. Weak identity seeks belonging. Strong identity seeks truth. Weak identity asks, where do I fit in? Strong identity asks, what is true? Weak identity seeks the comfort of similarity. Strong identity seeks the clarity of reality. Hypersensitivity thrives when identity seeks belonging more than truth. If your identity is secure, you don't need anyone to protect it. You don't need others to respect it. You don't need applause, defense, agreement, or validation. You simply exist, sovereign and independent. Weak identity turns life into a battle of ego. People with weak identities always feel attacked. Not because they are attacked, but because their ego is defensive. Every disagreement becomes war. Every critique becomes wound. Every opposing idea becomes threat. But the Stoic does not fight these battles because he has nothing to prove. Truth does not need ego armor. Weak identity's greatest fear is being wrong. Strong identity's greatest fear is avoiding truth. Weak identity is blind. The hypersensitive person sees offense where there is none. They interpret everything through the lens of insecurity. Someone says, you can improve that, and they hear, you are worthless. Someone says, I disagree, and they hear, you are stupid. Someone says, you're wrong, and they hear, you should be ashamed. This is not logical interpretation. It is emotional hallucination. So the hypersensitive person defends a self that doesn't even exist, a self built from projection, insecurity, and imagination. Weak identity uses morality as a shield. People with weak identities often turn to moral outrage to avoid self-reflection. They use ethics, values, and principles not as standards for themselves, but as shields against introspection. They weaponize morality to avoid looking inward. Stoicism rejects this hypocrisy. A Stoic holds himself accountable before he holds the world accountable. Weak identity is reactive. Strong identity is reflective. Weak identity reacts, attacks, defends, justifies, blames. Strong identity reflects, observes, examines, adjusts, improves. Weak identity has no control. It is a puppet of emotional triggers. Strong identity is in full command. It is self-governed. Weak identity cannot accept imperfection. Weak identity pretends perfection to avoid pain. Strong identity embraces imperfection to grow. Weak identity reacts, how dare you point that out? Strong identity says, thank you for revealing weakness. Now I can strengthen it. Weak identity hides flaws. Strong identity evolves. Weak identity is the ego. Strong identity is the soul. Weak identity is ego-based, external, reactive, fragile. Strong identity is soul-based, internal, grounded, resilient. The ego is terrified of being exposed. The soul welcomes exposure as purification. The Stoic path to strong identity. You cannot become unoffendable unless you become self-defined. You must know who you are without approval, applause, support, validation, agreement, permission. Identity must be chosen, not borrowed. The Stoic builds identity through discipline, introspection, values, principles, clarity, self-awareness. When you know who you are, no one can tell you who you are. That is freedom. Not freedom from criticism, but freedom from needing protection. Final truth of this lesson. You are not offended because others attack you. You are offended because you have not built yourself from within. Offense is not injury. It is identity insufficiency. Hypersensitivity thrives where identity is weak. Strength thrives where identity is real. The Stoic becomes unshakable not by commanding silence, but by mastering self. 5. Hypersensitivity comes from a fragile sense of identity. Hypersensitivity is not born from care, morality, or nobility. It is born from fragile identity. People who know who they are, who live internally rooted, who move through the world anchored in character. They can hear disagreement, criticism, mockery, rejection, differing values, and remain composed, balanced, centered. Meanwhile, those with fragile identity crumble at the slightest vibration of contradiction. This lesson will feel confrontational, but truth requires confrontation. We think hypersensitivity is a problem of thin skin. It is not. It is a problem of weak foundation. You can't offend someone who is deeply grounded. Just like you can't rattle a mountain by shouting at it. But you can destabilize someone who is hollow inside, someone who relies on external validation, someone desperate to please the world, someone who has never anchored themselves to personal values, someone who built their identity based on approval rather than integrity. Stoicism never said, be emotionless. It said, know who you are, so the world cannot shake you. Why we become offended, the identity wound. The hypersensitive person does not react because of what was said. They react because of what it threatens. If someone is insecure about their intelligence, a joke feels like an attack. If someone is insecure about their appearance, a comment feels like humiliation. If someone is insecure about their worth, a disagreement feels like rejection. The Stoic points directly to the truth. You are not hurt by what others say. You are hurt by the meaning you assign to it. Words enter the ear, but insecurity gives them emotional power. A deeply rooted person is unshaken because they are not negotiating their identity with strangers, opinions, insults, or trends. They already know themselves. Hypersensitivity, therefore, is not caused by society. Society merely exposes where you have not yet become whole. Stoic truth. If you take everything personally, you don't know yourself. When every comment feels personal, you have not built a self that stands independent of others. If someone says, you're wrong, a strong identity replies, perhaps. Let's discuss. A fragile identity replies, how dare you disagree with me? If someone says, you aren't talented, a strong identity replies, that's your opinion. My work speaks for itself. A fragile identity replies, I am worthless. If someone says, you're acting foolish, a strong identity replies, maybe I need perspective. A fragile identity replies, you're attacking me. The Stoic sees this and says, weak identity reacts. Strong identity reflects. Your reactions reveal who you are. Outrage culture is just a collection of fragile identities. Modern culture rewards hypersensitivity. We confuse outrage with virtue, emotional panic with empathy, fragility with righteousness, insecurity with moral strength. We applaud vulnerability, but demonize resilience. People build their identity around political opinions, social groups, labels, trending belief systems. And when someone challenges one of these, even mildly, they treat it as a personal assault. Stoicism calls this psychological dependency. You have outsourced your sense of self. Hypersensitivity is the alarm ringing, alerting you that your identity was never your own. How manipulators use fragile identities. People who take offense easily are the easiest to control. If I can predict your emotional reactions, I can steer your behavior. If I know you crave validation, I can manipulate your decisions. If your identity is fragile, I can intimidate you without force. Strong identities resist manipulation, not because they are rude, but because they are self-defined. Stoicism protects you because it teaches. No one decides who you are but you. So the hypersensitive person becomes a puppet, while the Stoic becomes immovable. Stoic observation. The oversensitive person demands immunity from reality. Hypersensitivity is a kind of entitlement. A person who takes offense expects others to talk their way, others to validate them, others to never challenge them, others to protect their feelings. But reality doesn't negotiate. It doesn't shape itself to your insecurity. The Stoic sees this clearly. You don't need the world to step softly around you. You need to strengthen yourself so you can walk firmly through the world. A hypersensitive person tries to control what others say. A Stoic learns to control how they internalize. Why Stoics are so hard to manipulate? Not because they are cold, not because they are cynical, not because they are emotionless, but because they have rooted identity, self-accountability, emotional discipline, internal standards, secure self-worth, mental boundaries. You can insult them, but you cannot destabilize them. They know the difference between words and truth. They don't need universal agreement to validate their existence. The Stoic practice. Define yourself before the world does. The hypersensitive person is psychologically exposed. They are like a fortress without walls. So Stoicism gives you walls, not to trap you, but to protect you. Ask yourself, what do I stand for when no one approves of me? What values define me when everyone disagrees? What principles guide me when praise disappears? Because until you can answer these questions, you will remain offended, fragile, reactive, insecure, a storm waiting for someone to push you. Identity is not built through validation. Identity is built through introspection. A powerful Stoic exercise. If you dare to be honest, write down things you are insecure about, things you take personally, people whose approval you seek, opinions that trigger you. Then ask, what does this reveal about what I have not accepted in myself yet? This is confrontational. And that is exactly why it works. Hypersensitivity is a mirror reflecting wounds. If you want emotional freedom, first acknowledge the wound. Do not confuse acceptance with weakness. Acceptance is the beginning of strength. If you admit, I'm insecure about my intelligence, you can start reading, learning, growing. If you admit, I'm insecure about my image, you can improve your health, posture, discipline, self-care. If you admit, I'm insecure about my worth, you can build achievements that validate your competence. Hypersensitivity hides insecurity. Stoicism reveals it, so it can be conquered. Don't build an identity out of what you are against. This is one of the most profound Stoic lessons. Weak people define themselves by who they hate, what they argue about, what they oppose, what they reject, who disagrees with them. Strong people define themselves by internal values, principles, discipline, character, vision. If your identity depends on conflict, you will always be offended. The ultimate Stoic truth of this lesson. You cannot be offended by something that does not shake your identity. Hypersensitivity is not your fate. It's a signal. And that signal says, you have more inner work to do. It is not an insult, not a judgment, not a condemnation. It is an invitation to strength. Final Stoic message for this lesson. You have two paths. Continue being emotionally fragile, allowing the world to define you, offend you, manipulate you. Build a grounded identity, one that is immune to petty criticisms, resistant to emotional chaos, and anchored in principles. The Stoic path does not demand perfection. It demands ownership. When you know yourself, the world cannot control you. And that is emotional freedom. 6. Offense is a choice, not a reaction. One of the cruelest illusions of our age is the belief that offense is automatic, involuntary, and justified by default. People talk as if emotional pain is something done to them, as if they are hostages to words, opinions, and viewpoints. But the Stoic understands something radically empowering. Offense is not inflicted, it is chosen. Not consciously chosen. Most people are not self-aware enough for that, but subconsciously, impulsively, reactively. The hypersensitive person hears something disagreeable and immediately interprets it as a personal attack. Not because they are victims of harsh words, but because they train themselves to react emotionally instead of thinking critically. This lesson will stretch your mind and maybe your ego because it removes excuses and exposes responsibility. Let's walk into it. Reactions are trained, not soldiers of instinct. We grow up in environments where emotional reactivity is normalized. Someone criticizes you gives you get offended. Someone disagrees gives you get angry. Someone challenges your belief gives you feel attacked. Someone exposes a flaw gives you feel humiliated. Most people assume this is human nature. It isn't. It's conditioning. Stoicism teaches that we are not victims of our conditioning. We are responsible for reprogramming it. You have been trained to take offense. You were not born that way, which means you can untrain it. This is the key truth. The trigger is external, but the reaction is internal. Words don't enter your bloodstream. Opinions don't damage your lungs. Criticism doesn't bruise your skin. You get offended because you interpret, not because you are attacked. The Stoic distinction that frees you. There are two events involved. What was said, the meaning you attach to it. People confuse the two. They think, I feel hurt because of what he said. No, you feel hurt because of what you decided that meant. Someone calls you lazy. You could interpret it as an insult, feedback, insecurity projected from them, a reminder to improve a joke, irrelevant noise. Your reaction is a choice of interpretation, not a forced emotion. Emotions are real, but not always true. Stoicism does not deny feelings. It denies the notion that feelings are facts. You can feel insulted without actually being insulted. You can feel attacked without actually being attacked. You can feel disrespected without actually being disrespected. Emotion is valid. Interpretation is questionable. The Stoic superpower is not suppressing emotion. It is questioning emotion. And once questioned, it often dissolves. Offense comes from ego, not truth. There is a painful truth here. Most offense is not about morality. It's about insecurity. People get offended when their ego is poked. If someone points out something you already fear about yourself, you react explosively. Someone calls you lazy, stupid, weak, insecure, sensitive, dramatic, fake. Hit the right insecurity and hypersensitivity detonates. But the Stoic knows, I am not defined by someone's words, but by my response to them. Offense is ego protecting itself through emotional overreaction. Stoic paradox. When you don't take offense, you become stronger. Weak people think responding explosively shows strength, but it reveals fragility. Strong people know silence is a weapon. Indifference is armor. Composure is dominance. You can wound someone emotionally with nothing but calm. The most powerful response to provocation is always the same, not reacting, not ignoring literally, but refusing to give them emotional power. When you do not react, you retain control. You reveal confidence. You prove maturity. You expose insecurity in the attacker. It is impossible to manipulate someone who refuses to be offended. So why do most people choose offense? Because offense gives illusion of power. If I am offended, then I get attention, I get sympathy, I get moral superiority. I get control of the narrative. The hypersensitive person gets addicted to outrage because outrage reinforces ego. Being offended gives them identity. I must be right because I am upset. But Stoicism laughs at this. Feelings do not make truth. Truth makes feelings. The modern truth. Hypersensitivity is social currency in the modern world. Outrage attracts followers. Victimhood attracts validation. Offense attracts applause. People don't want solutions. They want emotional ammunition. They take offense not because they are hurt, but because they want the attention that hurt brings. They weaponize hypersensitivity to manipulate people into silence. Stoicism doesn't fall for this. Stoicism knows that the moment you make your emotions someone else's responsibility, you forfeit power. When you choose offense, you choose enslavement. This is the harshest truth of the lesson. When you allow others to emotionally provoke you, you hand them authority over your state of mind. If a stranger's words can ruin your day, they own part of you. If someone's disagreement can derail your mood, you are emotionally dependent. If someone's insult can destabilize your self-worth, you are psychologically fragile. The Stoic refuses to give that power away. How Stoicism breaks the offense habit here is how a Stoic intercepts offense. Step 1. Hear the words. Step 2. Observe the emotional impulse. Step 3. Ask, why did this anger me? Step 4. Address the reason, not the trigger. If someone calls you weak and you explode, the problem isn't them. It's your insecurity about weakness. If someone mocks you and you feel humiliated, the problem isn't them. It's your dependence on approval. If someone disagrees and you rage, the problem isn't them. It's your attachment to being right. Your reaction says more about you than them. The Stoic reframe. Criticism is feedback when someone criticizes you. A hypersensitive person thinks, they're attacking me. A Stoic asks, is there any truth here that can help me grow? If yes, improvement begins. If no, there's nothing to take offense at. Either way, offense is unnecessary. You win either way. A Stoic practice that makes you almost unoffendable. This will feel uncomfortable but liberating. Whenever you get offended, ask, what part of me is insecure here? If someone points out something that is genuinely false, you wouldn't care. If someone points out something irrelevant, you wouldn't care. You only care when something strikes an insecurity. This means offense is not about them. It's about unhealed parts of you. The moment you admit this, offense loses power. You disarm it. You are not supposed to control others, only yourself, hypersensitivity says. They must not hurt me. Stoicism says, it's my job to grow stronger. Hypersensitivity tries to change people. Stoicism changes self. Hypersensitivity blames. Stoicism transforms. Hypersensitivity collapses. Stoicism endures. The Stoic sees offense and says, you have no power here. The ultimate Stoic truth of this lesson, offense, is the reaction of someone who cannot control their interpretation. Freedom is the calm of someone who can. You don't need thicker skin. You need deeper understanding. You don't need everyone to speak softly. You need emotional sovereignty. You don't need a safer world. You need a stronger self. Final Stoic message of this lesson. You will never live in a world where people speak only what you approve. But you can live in a world where nothing others say can shake you. There is no freedom in demanding silence from others. Freedom comes from mastering your internal dialogue. And when you master that, you become unshakable. Offense becomes optional. And emotional peace becomes your permanent companion. 7. The world doesn't owe you emotional comfort. This lesson will challenge entitlement, ego, and the silent belief many people live by that others should protect their feelings, tiptoe around their sensitivities, and adapt to their emotional vulnerabilities. Hypersensitivity thrives on the assumption, people should talk to me gently. They should avoid offending me. They should filter themselves to protect my feelings. But the world is not a therapist. People are not obligated to speak to you in a tone you approve of. Human beings are not required to build emotional padding for your fragility. This is the brutal truth. Reality will not adjust to your sensitivities. You must build the strength to thrive within reality. That truth is not comforting, but it is liberating. Let's break it apart deeply. Your feelings are valid, but they are not other people's responsibility. Modern culture has created a dangerous psychological illusion. If I'm hurt by something, others are obligated to stop. No philosophy, no psychology, no moral framework can defend that. Your feelings matter to you, but they are not binding contracts on other people. Stoicism's message is, your emotions are your responsibility, not the world's burden. That isn't cold, it's freeing. When you stop expecting others to manage your feelings for you, you take back control of your emotional life. Misconception. Stoics don't feel anything. Let's clear this up. Stoics feel. They feel disappointment. They feel sadness. They feel frustration. They feel pain. The difference is simple. They do not outsource responsibility for those emotions. Hypersensitive people outsource blame. You made me feel this way. Stoics accept ownership. I felt this way, and now I must master the emotion within me. One path leads to empowerment. The other leads to perpetual victimhood. The moment you expect others to protect your feelings, you become their prisoner. If you rely on someone to speak kindly to you so you won't feel hurt, then they control you. If you rely on someone to agree with you so you won't feel attacked, then they control you. If you rely on someone to validate you so you won't feel insecure, then they control you. The Stoic sees this clearly. You cannot be free if your emotional stability depends on the behavior of others. Hypersensitivity enslaves you. Stoicism frees you. The world is not designed for your sensitivity, and that's a good thing. The world is indifferent, not cruel, not hostile, just indifferent. This neutrality is what makes strength possible. If life were gentle, there would be no growth, no resilience, no maturity, no grit. Strength only exists because challenges exist. Confidence only exists because adversity exists. Composure only exists because provocations exist. Stoicism never promised comfort. It promised capability. But I can't help how I feel. Yes, you can. This is one of the most dishonest beliefs promoted in modern thinking. You cannot control your feelings. Actually, you can. Not instantly. Not perfectly. Not without effort. But you can. You can. Challenge thoughts, question interpretations, shift perspectives, build emotional regulation, strengthen self-awareness. Stoicism teaches emotional control, not through denial, but through mastery. Hypersensitive people refuse to try. Stoics work on themselves relentlessly. People are not responsible for the stories you create in your head. This is the heart of the lesson. Someone says something. You interpret it emotionally, then blame them. But they didn't put the meaning there. You did. If someone says, you could have done better, a hypersensitive person hears, you're worthless. If someone says, we disagree, a hypersensitive person hears, you are inferior. If someone says, you made a mistake, a hypersensitive person hears, you are a failure. The Stoic sees the difference. Words are external. The meaning is internal. Your interpretation is your responsibility, not theirs. You don't need a safe space. You need a strong mind. There is a modern obsession with safe spaces, environments where nobody can disagree, criticize, provoke, or challenge anyone. Do you know why these spaces exist? Not because humans need safety, but because humans avoid growth. Safe spaces protect the ego, not the spirit. Stoicism doesn't create safe spaces. It creates strong people who don't need them. You cannot build resilience in an emotional sandbox. You have to step into the real world. Real maturity is measured by how little offense you take. Immature people need validation, politeness, softness, constant reassurance, emotional babysitters. Mature people need truth, clarity, honesty, responsibility, work growth. Maturity is not age. Maturity is ownership. You can be 50 years old and emotionally hypersensitive like a 5-year-old. You can be 20 years old and stoic like a philosopher. The difference is emotional responsibility. If you expect the world to adapt to you, you will always be disappointed. Here is a psychological guarantee. The more you expect others to protect your feelings, the more people will eventually disappoint you. Not out of cruelty, but out of inevitability. Human beings are unpredictable. Communication is messy. Conflict is unavoidable. You cannot eliminate disagreement. You must learn to withstand it. You cannot eliminate criticism. You must learn to process it. You cannot eliminate offense. You must learn to rise above it. The world doesn't owe you comfort, but you owe yourself strength. Stoic exercise. The world is the gym. Your emotions are the muscle. Think of life like weightlifting. Weights are uncomfortable. Resistance is exhausting. Training is painful. But that pain builds strength. You don't remove the weights. You become stronger than them. You don't demand emotional comfort. You train emotional resilience. Every disagreement, every criticism, every provocation is a weight that can build your strength. The Stoic mindset is, life strengthens me, not harms me. Your emotions belong to you, and that is your power. The hypersensitive person is terrified of owning their emotions. The Stoic embraces it. Because the moment you accept ownership, you gain control. Responsibility is not a burden. It is freedom. When you say, I control my reaction, you take back power. When you say, I choose my meaning, you take back identity. When you say, my emotions are my work, not yours, you take back sovereignty. The ultimate Stoic truth of this lesson. If the world must protect your feelings, you will forever feel unsafe. But if you learn to master your feelings, you become untouchable. Your emotions are not weapons others use against you. They are tools you learn to wield. Hypersensitivity expects kindness from everyone. Stoicism learns to remain stable regardless. Final Stoic message of this lesson: you are not entitled to emotional comfort. And that is good, because comfort weakens you. Challenge strengthens you. Struggle matures you. Discomfort sharpens you. Adversity defines you. The world doesn't owe you a gentle environment. It gives you something more valuable, a battlefield to forge character. And once you realize that, offense loses power. Hypersensitivity loses meaning. And emotional freedom becomes not a fantasy, but a practiced skill. This is the Stoic path. 8. Hypersensitivity is an illusion of importance. We have arrived at the final lesson. Here, the Stoic pulls no punches. Hypersensitivity, offense, and overreaction are not truths about the world. They are illusions about your own importance. Most people who feel perpetually offended believe, on some level, that the universe revolves around them. They think every word, glance, disagreement, joke, or critique is directed personally at their fragile self. This is a fundamental error. You are not the center of the world. Your emotional state is not the universe's responsibility. Your feelings, though real, do not demand universal accommodation. And the moment you accept this, the spell of hypersensitivity begins to break. The great truth: nothing is about you. Everything external exists independently of your feelings, desires, or ego. Someone criticizes you, not necessarily to wound you, but because that is their thought or perspective. Someone disagrees, not because you are wrong, but because truth exists independently of your approval. Someone insults or mocks, not because you are inferior, but because people are flawed, careless, or emotional. A Stoic internalizes this truth. Offense arises only when I mistakenly assume that everything revolves around me. Hypersensitivity is self-centeredness disguised as vulnerability. You are offended because you believe your ego is important enough to be attacked. The Stoic knows better. Your ego is irrelevant in the grand scheme of existence. Hypersensitivity is a delusion of relevance. In hypersensitivity, small events are magnified. A passing comment feels catastrophic. A minor critique feels like humiliation. A joke feels like a moral violation. A difference of opinion feels like betrayal. Why? Because the person has inflated their own sense of importance. The Stoic asks, does this matter in the cosmos? In life? In 10 years? If the answer is no, and most minor offenses are trivial, then emotional investment is wasted energy. Hypersensitivity creates mountains out of pebbles. Stoicism sees the pebble for what it is. Offense as a tool of ego inflation. When someone constantly takes offense, they are unconsciously signaling, "Look at me. Pay attention. I matter." Hypersensitivity is performative, whether intentional or not. Social media outrage is a modern manifestation. Online arguments are fueled by fragile egos seeking validation. Sensitivity becomes currency. The more easily offended, the more attention received. The Stoic sees the pattern and refuses to participate. Attention is wasted on ego, not virtue. When you stop feeling important, you stop being offended. This is the paradox. The less central you feel to every narrative, the freer you become. If someone yells, you hear noise. If someone criticizes, you hear perspective. If someone mocks, you hear life being life. Offense is a signal of inflated ego. Stoicism deflates that signal through perspective. Remember, the world does not revolve around your discomfort. When you internalize this, emotional freedom is inevitable. The role of humility in ending offense, hypersensitivity, and pride are inseparable. The person who is easily offended believes they are morally, socially, or intellectually significant enough to warrant protection. Humility dissolves offense. Recognize your limitations. Accept your flaws. Understand the imperfection of others. Grasp the insignificance of minor slights. When humility guides perception, words lose power. Offense cannot take root in a mind grounded in reality. Hypersensitivity wastes your life. Every emotional eruption steals. Clarity, focus, energy, time, inner peace. Modern hypersensitivity thrives on constant distraction. Scrolling social media for something to be outraged about, replaying past offenses, anticipating future slights. All energy is consumed maintaining the illusion that you are perpetually under attack. Stoicism cuts this cycle. It frees you to focus on what matters: virtue, wisdom, self-improvement, and meaningful action. The Stoic solution: see yourself small, see life large. A Stoic perspective asks, compared to the universe, my offense is meaningless. Compared to virtue, my rage is irrelevant. Compared to wisdom, my hurt is trivial. By measuring yourself against life itself, the illusion of importance fades. What once seemed catastrophic becomes negligible. What once seemed urgent becomes irrelevant. Hypersensitivity collapses because it relies entirely on an inflated sense of self. The empowerment in accepting insignificance, ironically, recognizing that you are not the center of the universe, is liberating. You no longer depend on external validation. You no longer require constant approval. You no longer expect the world to behave according to your ego. You no longer hand over your emotional power to others. When you stop assigning universal significance to every insult, critique, or disagreement, emotional sovereignty is achieved. The Stoic thrives here. The hypersensitive never arrives. Offense is a choice. Humility is the cure. You always have the choice. Inflate your ego and be offended, reactive, and enslaved by others' words. Embrace humility and choose freedom, calm, and detachment from trivialities. Choosing humility does not make you weak. It makes you strong beyond the reach of petty provocations. A Stoic understands no one can insult what is not dependent on their validation. Practical Stoic exercises to dissolve hypersensitivity. Daily perspective check. Ask yourself, will this matter in 1 year, 10 years, a lifetime? Detachment meditation. Visualize yourself as an observer of life, not its center. Ego audit. Identify moments where offense arises from pride rather than truth. Accountability reflection. Accept responsibility for emotional reactions instead of blaming others. Humility reminder. Repeat, I am small. Life is vast. Others act according to their own nature. Consistent practice rewires the mind. Offense loses its grip. Hypersensitivity fades. The ultimate Stoic truth of this lesson: offense exists only when you believe you are central, important, or entitled. Hypersensitivity is an illusion, a self-centered hallucination projected onto reality. When you stop thinking the world revolves around your comfort, you stop being manipulated by words, opinions, and actions. You reclaim your emotional sovereignty. You reclaim your energy. You reclaim your freedom. Final message: embrace insignificance, embrace freedom. You are not the universe. You are not the arbiter of truth, morality, or behavior. The world does not revolve around you, and it never will. And that is liberating. It frees you from hypersensitivity, emotional dependence, and the chains of offense. The Stoic lives in reality. The hypersensitive lives in an illusion of importance. Choose reality. Choose freedom. Choose strength. This is the path of unshakable peace. This is the end of offense.